Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, the show where we talk about all the crazy, stupid stuff that people do and how to not do that, but instead do smart, meaningful things that allow you to spend meaningful time, meaningful efforts, and meaningful energy in all of your marketing activities so that they deliver business results. Okay, folks, this has been driving me nuts lately, is that there's so many marketing things that people do and they're not necessarily tied to business results. And it's not what we talk about here. We talk about connecting all the dots, but starting from the foundations of things. And so if you're new to the show, this show is very exploratory. So while a lot of other pieces of content you might consume on the internet are very much about telling you what you should do, this show is absolutely not about that. It is about presenting options of things that you can try on. And if you try on a thing and it feels good and you want to try on more of it, to give you access to people who can help you try on more of those things. And if you try it on and you don't like it, to be able to build your confidence in being able to say, no, that is not right for me. So it may feel a little bit different. If you're joining us for the first time, it may feel a little bit different. It may feel, like I said, exploratory, tangential. There will be a lot of storytelling, I can tell you, especially with the two of us that we have on this episode today. And again, like if you're like, oh, this is not tactical enough for me, that is good. Not meant to be tactical. So if you are in the right mindset, and also if you're joining us and you've joined us before, then you kind of get the vibe of the show. Either way, we are very happy to have you here. And there's this fancy little get in the conversation methodology called the comments that is available wherever you're watching live. So if you are joining us live, we would love for you to get into the comments. So for you to ask questions about what we're talking about today, if you have your own experiences, if you have your own perspectives or insights you would like to share, we would really love to hear those because they make the conversation even more robust. We really encourage you to share. Okay, what are we talking about today? Would you guys like to know? I'd like to know. What we're talking about is one of those ideas that actually allows dots to be connected. So for those of you who know me, I am very much a dot connector. I love looking at a whole bunch of stuff and being like, where are the connecting points between these two things? And then I met Harish, and he has this really great philosophy called the Unifying Philosophy. Doesn't it sound like something that connects dots? Well, it is. So today we're going to be exploring what is a unifying philosophy, the value of a unifying philosophy, and what that might look like from a marketing perspective. How might marketers use that? How might marketers participate in helping a unifying philosophy be discovered? And how can marketers get in on this unifying philosophy that is really all about taking your business where you want your business to go. So I'm going to let Harish do a little bit more of an intro of what that is. Harish, can you give us a little bit of your background and what brought you to, let's say, the discovery or the invention of the unifying philosophy?
Well, Tracy, thank you. I'm excited to be here. It's been quite the journey. So I was 20 years old and I was painting the fence of a business professor. And he had basically, long story short, told me not to go to business school when I asked him if I should do my MBA. I was doing my engineering degree at the time and I said, I love strategy. So he said, just read whatever books you can get your hands on and you'll be fine. So he gave me all of his dusty magazines and I was walking home and I was like, why would a professor who's dependent on student enrollment tell me not to go to business school? And when an engineer reads business books, we're going to find things that don't work or they don't line up because our brains are wired for things to actually work. Because if things in engineering don't work, people die. Bridges collapse, trains don't work, cars don't move, etc., etc. So I started reading things and read all the books in Jack Lee's Outro, what they don't teach at Harvard. I mean, books, every single book, I'd go to the used bookstore. So fast forward, I did my industrial design degree. So I have electrical engineering and industrial design degree. So I have the sort of basic principles way of thinking or systems thinking in engineering. And then I have the holistic design thinking principles from industrial design, because we invented design thinking. So it was 1996. I was doing a branding project, rebranding one of the largest independent forklift dealerships in Canada. And he says, I'm going to compete against Toyota. It's like, first of all, he asked me, how's a logo going to make your money? And I was scared asking that question because I was selling him a logo and a rebranding. And I was sincere and honest. I said, look, logo is just the cost of doing business. It's like wearing a business suit. Unless you really put in value into that suit, it may or may not generate monetary value back, but it's the cost of doing business because you have to look good. So he bought that, but that really, that question really stayed with me around how do you really monetize the brand? So I started to work with him, and then he says, the whole thing about competing against Toyota. I said, well, I can't sell him an ad campaign, a strategic plan, a SWOT analysis. There was nothing I could sell him that would save him against Toyota. So I said, okay, well, he's been in business for 25 years. There must be some legacy and some core competencies that he does well. So how do I find out that secret sauce? And how do I then turn that into their core competency, take those core competencies and put that into a strategic advantage that Toyota will not overtake or could not overtake? So when we started to dig into the business model, he was into refurbished forklifts, lift trucks, and so quality to lift your profits. Well, just before I say that, so I said, so if I look at Jack Trout and Al Rees and the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing, I says, what's the one word that you want to stick in the customer's mind and own that mind share or wallet share? He said quality. I'm like, Toyota owns that word. They have 100%. They brought total quality management to the forefront. So how can he stand for quality? Of course, I didn't tell him that, tomorrow they'll put up a billboard saying Toyota quality and we'll be done. So quality to lift your profits became their unifying philosophy. So the unifying philosophy is the DNA of a business in 6 words or less. So it is a hybrid between a mission and vision statement and a tagline. And so it has the compactness of a tagline, but it has the expansiveness and depth of a mission and vision and values, which, by evidence doesn't work because no staff member remembers the mission and vision. Forget about operationalizing it. So the difference is that the unifying philosophy is a process. It's an intervention that transforms the stakeholders in the company. So it's different than an agency coming in and telling you or asking you questions about who are you, why are you here, or why are you in business. We go through a rigorous process that's anywhere from 3 to 9 months with the stakeholders. They're actually building the unifying philosophy. They're looking at how do I live the promise before I make the promise. So if brand is a promise, then, it's kind of backwards where you're saying you're coming in from the outside in, because I've done over 150 corporate identities. When you're coming from the outside in, you're telling them who they are, as opposed to you squeezing the lemon and saying, okay, here are 6 words or less. This is who we are. Now, I invented this in 1996. So you fast forward to 2001, Jim Collins publishes Good to Great. and he talks about a unifying principle. It's the exact same thing. It's taking all those things together, but the difference is that it's 6 words or less. It then becomes a trademark asset, which is where it connects all the dots. So it's trademarked and then put into a tax effective structure, so that now this becomes the connector of all the intangible assets to drive value in an organization. And I think that answers the question of sort of how it came to be. And I think Simon Sinek then talked about start with why. And in the unifying philosophy process, you can say I was ahead of my time. But back in 1996, I had 3 definitions of why, or 3 levels of why. So I'd ask the stakeholders, okay, so are you here to make money as a business? And there's nothing morally wrong with making money. That's why you're here. But if it's so, then declare that that's your why. If you're here to make a difference in the industry, which is the next level of why, then let's declare it so. We want to be rule breakers, or like the challenger mindset, and be the rebel in the rebel brand, or whatever you want to call it. And if you are here to make a difference in the world, then let's align everything to those levels of why. So, Tracy, you always talk about the soul of the company, or the soul of the leadership. So this is how we cultivate that soul. Now we're just taking the soul and now putting it into words so that we can operationalize it. So it's all about living the brand, living the marketing, living the customer service, living supply chain, living the operations, living the finance and the HR, all connected to the unifying philosophy. So everybody at this client's firm would go and say, I'm responsible for delivering quality to lift your profits. And the last thing, just to close any curiosity, is that they basically duplicated the Toyota warranty, because Toyota was only offering a 1-year warranty. And so they were able to refurbish the trucks for half the price. So you can get 2 forklifts for the price of 1 Toyota with the same warranty. So Toyota would never be able to claim the space from a strategic advantage perspective, a marketing perspective, that we will lift anybody's profits. They could never say that. So now this was 1996, that company's still around, and it's gone to the 2nd generation as a family business. So that's a huge sort of proof of concept of how this works. And just recently, I had another client who has been my client since 2002, actually sold his company with the unifying philosophy operationalized, and it transcended to a post-acquisition culture. So it monetized tremendously well. So I think if we look at the definition of winning in business, which is another story we can get into, Tracy, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So, I mean, I'm glad you took it there, because I had every intention of going towards this direction of winning in business. Because, Harish, when you and I first met, we had this conversation about how in athletics, in sports, it's very well defined what winning looks like. And people get coached to move towards that destination. And everyone, whether that is a Major League Baseball player or somebody who is playing pickup ball on the field for the first time, everybody knows that winning looks like scoring more runs than the other team, or scoring more points in general, right? We score more points, we win the game. That's what it looks like to win. And while each sport is different in like how you do that, it's very clear that that is what we do to win a game. And in business, I think so. Like, I'd love to hear, because you've had lots of experience in this arena. I think a lot of times people think winning is making more money than the other company, because then we can kind of extrapolate it to sports and say like money is like points. And if we just make a certain amount of money, then we win. But there's more to it than that. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so let's dissect this from a data perspective, because my engineering roots comes in and says, okay, well, where's the data? If we look at the entrepreneurial market, because that's really sort of the engine of the world, is 95% of all businesses are small medium enterprises.
Small businesses, yeah.
Right, we drive the world. It's not the multinationals. So when you look at that, 80% of businesses don't sell. So they have so essentially people spend their life, they build a company, and then they find out that they can't sell the business. So did they really win? So it's a difference of, is the entrepreneur there to build a business for cash as a lifestyle? Or are they there to build a business for wealth, generational wealth? Then it becomes that as a part of definition of winning, okay? Now, more data. You have 6% end up exiting at fair market value. Why is exiting important? Because at the end of the day, do you want to trade 20, 30, 40 years of your life and not get anything for your business? Some people, it's okay.
Again, I think if there's the people in the lifestyle category, maybe that's not their.
If you cross the $1 million, $3 million, $5 million bracket, you start to wonder, wow, I have something tangible here or meaningful, and I would love to retire from it, or I'd love to pass something on to my children, even if it's not the business. It could be wealth, which is sort of some of the wisdoms in family business is pass the wealth, don't pass the business. Because the passing the businesses has some data attached to it. So from first to second generation, 2/3 fail. From first to the founding generation to the third generation, you have a 90% failure rate. So building value then becomes very paramount, especially handing your children a valuable company is very different than a profitable company, because you could lose the profits, but value you can harness if it's well managed. So the last piece of data is that why in the world are anywhere from 2/3 to 75% of the world of employees disengaged? Okay, so if you're a sports team and you are like, oh my God, we're playing a game and we have no clue what winning is. Where's the ball and where's the net? Now, is it maximizing shareholder value? Yeah, okay, great. Are people engaged to play that game? No. The evidence from Gallup for the last 15 to 20 years is hovering around 66 to 75%, and it's only increasing. It might go up and down, but a 75% failure rate or 66% failure rate is bad. It's a bad report card. And it's not moderately bad. It's not like 25 or 30%. It's really bad. So this is the state of the world. And so I don't think maximizing shareholder value makes sense, because as an employee, I don't have any stock. So how can I feel like I'm going to win? So that's the evidence. The evidence is 2/3 are checked out. Okay, so they're losing value in their own selves, going to work every day, not finding meaning, not finding purpose, not finding any type of engagement or desire or motivation to want to do anything more. Does the paycheck satisfy that? No. Does their benefits satisfy that? No, it's not. So something's missing. Something big is missing. And from the entrepreneur perspective, the owner or the shareholders, let's look at what value really means. So when you talk about maximizing shareholder value, well, 84% of a company's value are intangible assets. Okay, so now who's talking about intangible assets? How do you connect all those disparate assets? So
because now, I'd like to dive into that again later, but please continue for now.
So when you have a sports team, yes, Tracy, you're right. You're explicitly clear on what winning is. So I've come up with the definition of winning when it comes to entrepreneurial companies and addresses the data around value creation. Okay. I'd like to say one thing also about the gaps in business. So everybody's sort of now working on the business model canvas. You know, it was somebody's PhD research. Okay. But when I look at those 9 boxes, I go, where's value creation? Where's value creation when you apply for a job? If maximizing shareholder value is the definition of winning, I don't know any job application or any interview that says, hey, you know what, we want you to create value for us. And here's how we do that. See, so we see a huge disparity between sports and business. So I look at business right now as nobody knows the definition of winning. Nobody has any consensus on it. We're all playing on the field and nobody knows where the ball is or where the goalposts are.
Mm.
And
okay,
yeah,
I'd like to actually, because I think there's an interesting connection to the intangible assets here. Because when you look at the hiring process, or like what a lot of people will put on a resume, tangible assets. These are tangible things. They're skills that I have. They're achievements I have done. They're tangible, and they're not only tangible, but they are explicit, right? And not tacit. I'm not keeping them to myself. I'm sharing them with the group. But when I look at, in my experience, the types of things that have generated value, the value creation, is that it is connected to these intangible assets. It's people's ways of being, it's people's energy flow, it's access to ideation, it's a bunch of things that, if, especially from a marketing point of view, because marketers love be data-driven marketers, right? And they track all their post impressions and email opens and like all of these things, and like none of that is intangible assets. Okay. So if what you're saying is that 80% of the value, if not more, of an organization is coming from its intangible assets, and we as a business want to be valuable, we want to be able to look at what our people are doing on a day-to-day and be like, there's value creation that's happening in that role or in that department, then can we get around that without talking about tangible or intangible assets? Or is like this really where we need to look, the intangible assets?
Okay, so if we just look at the data alone, and you have 2/3 or 3/4 of your people not engaged, that's called value destruction. And it's happening on a daily basis from your people within. So if one of the intangible assets and value drivers is human capital, it's getting destroyed every day.
Okay, so quick, before you dive even deeper to that, because what I'm experiencing here is that there's, I think what a lot of people might assume in a business or in a company or organization perspective is that there's value creation or there's value. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is I think people either think they're either creating value or they're doing nothing. But zero is the lowest. But what you're saying is that there's value destruction.
Yeah, because if you're not creating it, then what are you doing? It's because there's no stagnation in business. You're either declining or you're going up. the reason why is because in business, there's always undercurrents, there's always environmental factors, there's always competitive threats. So if you're not playing your A game, you're up to losing ground, losing momentum, losing traction, being susceptible to black swan events. So all of these things are risk factors. And when it comes to risk, it's the enemy of value.
And I think this is a big point. And I'm like, what I want to do is just like, for our listeners and anyone watching us on replay as well, is just like hammer home the fact that if we're not, and I would say this even as like individual entrepreneurs, right? If we are showing up doing a thing that is not generating value, we are not just like coasting along at zero. We don't have this like nice coast along at zero.
No,
there's
no
something that's being lost. And I think that's really important to look at, because I also think in looking at the types of things you might be losing, there might be some insight there into your competitive advantage, into a potential unifying philosophy in like, oh, we might be okay in losing XYZ, but in the example you gave in your intro, Harish, we're not okay with losing quality. Right? We are 0% okay with losing quality, and we are 0% okay with our clients declining. Right? So if people do business with us so that they can increase their money, these are now two brand stands I can take. Yes. And that can tie into the unifying philosophy, because it like can help us to see, because all of us, we all have different values as individuals and as businesses. And there might be some things where you're like, we're losing on that.
But on the soccer field, you cannot be different in what defines winning. We can't play different games.
If I'm like, the number of times I touch the out of bounds is is what makes me winning, then people would be like, you're not playing the right game.
So I just wanted to share this with everybody here. So maximizing value is not enough, because I should be able to monetize the value. So especially in an entrepreneurial scenario. So it's different in a public company, but if I'm not able to cash in on my stock easily, then it's not monetizable.
Right.
Okay, so this is the definition of the value part. Now, as an entrepreneur, do you want to build value and then pay an exorbitant amount of taxes?
No.
Right. So that's the difference between smart value creation and dumb value creation. I'm just putting the polarities on it.
Well, and we are the crazy stupid marketing show, so I don't think our viewers intend on doing crazy stupid things.
Right. So then when I talked about the data around people are your people are your engines to create value, because they're on the floor. They're the front lines. They're doing the do every day. So your value creation is going to come from your people. Now, there's lots of conversations around how do you flip the dial between engaging them, because you have to flip it from the fact that they're disengaged already, whether you call it quietly quitting or not quietly quitting. So for all invested needs to be part of the definition, which is the same thing with a sports team, right? I got LeBron James, who's invested in winning, and yes, he gets compensated accordingly, right? Versus Van Vliet, so there's different levels that happens in business. And I think the closest ones that I've heard that have a sort of athletic culture is Netflix. They sort of, what I've been studying and reading is that they sort of really emulated the sports metaphor in their business. But at the end of the day, all of this has to be driven by a central definition of this is the winning in business, but then how do you activate this so it's all connecting the dots to the 6 words or less, defining who you are, just like what I'm saying about it's got to be who you are. Why do customers buy from you? What's your strategic advantage? And how do you put that into an asset that generates value tax effectively?
Right. And I think this is, I mean, I feel like I've used this example on the show before too, but when we were city champions when I was in high school basketball, and our strategy was to run. So we were faster and could run for longer than any other team. That was our strategy. And we were city champions. I think what people, again, misinterpret when you take that kind of sports analogy and extrapolate it to business is that we all still know we're playing basketball, right? Like I'm not playing soccer, I am playing basketball. And then I create my value and or my unifying philosophy based on what I have. And what I have is still playing this game. Right? Because if I took my skills as basketball players and went to run on the soccer field and then judged my performance based on how many baskets I scored, I would fail because that even though I'm using my value. So the definition of winning and value are not the same thing, but they have to go together.
Tracy, I think it's assumed we're playing basketball.
I mean, yes, in sports, yes, but in business, no.
Yeah, in business, it's assumed we're playing the same game. Because, if you are people having conversations, hey, do you know why we're here? And if I ask that question to everyone in the same company, and if I'm definitely going to get different answers.
Right.
And that's where we're not playing the same game. Mm-hmm. Nobody's having the conversations that are really core and fundamental to this is who we are. This is why we do things. And by the way, I did write a book. So anybody who's on the show, I will be sending you an ebook, courtesy of Tracy. And in that, I talk about that. I lost my train of thought here. Is that when you have those meaningful conversations with, so in my book, I talk about when you do have a unifying philosophy, you are looking for the employees that will live that promise.
Right.
Intrinsically, already philosophically aligned to quality, lift their profits.
Right.
So now you're filtering how you recruit people. And you're, as a business, saying, this is who we are. Yeah. This is the type of customers that buy from us, the ones that value quality. So if they're going to pay a little bit more, they're going to know that I'm paying for quality to lift my profits. Right. All right. So I talk about why the customer is not number one. Okay? Because it's a flawed paradigm. So does that mean your investors are number two, your employees are number three, and it's a hierarchy that doesn't even make sense. Right. So what the corollary is that you're looking for your number one customer. You're looking for your number one employee. You're looking for your number one investor, your number one leader. And how do you find that? Your unifying philosophy. Mm-hmm. So I said, if I want to propel my unifying philosophy, I need to find somebody who believes and is a fanatic around quality. I want a mechanic that knows quality, like quality parts, quality service, fixes the machinery on site right the first time. We don't have to go back and, there's warehouse downtime.
Right.
Right? Because the client's going to freak out if the warehouse is not moving. So that forklift better work. So, these are all the things that you can operationalize the brand. You live the brand. We talk about that. So, and I find the other thing that has happened over this course of time is that, we now have internal branding, we have external branding. I mean, it's really gotten.
We have product marketing, we have content marketing, and
it's just more chaos and more anarchy. So I call it, you're either a business driven by philosophy or you're business driven by anarchy. because you don't have a definition of winning. I mean, I remember playing, when you first are a little kid and you play a game and somebody says, hey, do you want to play football? The Canadian football. It's like, yeah. So what's the point of the game? Oh, well, you got to take the ball and you got to cross the line, and that's called a touchdown. But we talk about winning. That's the first question that gets answered. How do you win? How do you play to win? And if we don't have the definition of winning, then we're just all playing our own game.
Yeah, and I think you make a really great point about the hierarchy, right? Customer one and someone else is then two, but also kind of flipping that and looking at it as who is your number one customer? Who's your number one employee? How do these people work together in an ecosystem that is unified under this philosophy? Because I think again, we go into hiring processes or things like that, and we don't think about who is our number one employee, which seems ridiculous even as I say it out loud. But I don't think that's going into most job descriptions.
How could they know? They're they're just saying, oh, we have a gap with this particular role.
Right. These particular tasks.
Yeah, tasks, exactly. So it's been really, I think they call it in HR world, Fordism. So Fordism is all about you have somebody doing a job, and that's all they do on the assembly line.
Right.
Right. So building Fords, so and I think when companies do that, they've really made the corporate culture so robotic and A plus B equals C. Where's the innovation? Where's the imagination? Where's the creativity? Where's the magic? Where's the energy that drives?
It doesn't exist.
Exactly.
75% of people are disengaged.
Well, there you go. I mean, thanks, Tracy. So I just feel that this is where it becomes a systemic or chronic problem in the world of business. When I say business is broken, this is what it is. And I mean, so let's not worry about solving the multinational problem. This is really about the entrepreneur and the family business whose entire life is on the line in building a company. They put blood, sweat, and tears into that organization, and they need to now extract value. They need to have their people stop destroying the value, and they need to pivot. They need to pivot fast. My latest presentation is that, the entrepreneurship is the Titanic.
And hopefully we all know what happened in that scenario.
Well, yeah, but I mean, so when you dissect it, Captain Smith did get warning calls that there's an ice field. Other ships were stopped, and he just felt like, no, we're unsinkable. And he kept cruising. He was cruising at 22 knots. Okay, so you deliberately thought you're indestructible. So most owners, CEOs think, oh, I'm a $10 million, $50 million, $100 million company. I'm going to sell. So-and-so told me I could be worth this much. Okay, great. Did you get it tested? No, you didn't get it tested. Did you get it tested by several different people? No, you didn't. That's a risk. So they're all on this Titanic. And I think when you look at, okay, so how do I extract value? And if you're not paying attention to that 84% of intangible assets, that's a huge miss. And value needs to be built from when the Titanic left the ship, it left the dock. That's when you start the business is when you start to drive value. So if you're close to the iceberg, it's very hard to drive a lot of value.
Right.
Like you have to do other things to really pivot fast to then, have that lifeboat position where I'm going to dodge the iceberg.
Right.
So it all depends on sort of what is the business, the goal of the business from the owner's perspective. Have they been using it as a lifestyle company and then now they're going to start to think about value? Or have they always been wanting to do value, but haven't figured out how to extract the value and maximize it? and how do they get their people on board?
So let's look at this from the perspective of, like as you mentioned, there's different things that you have to do if you're getting close to the iceberg and you need to pivot. But let's look at this from like closer to the beginning. So people are starting businesses and they've like just kind of maybe defined or realized that I do want this to be an exitable business. I want to generate this value that isn't just, I like to do my job every day, and when I die, the business dies. What are some things that they could start exploring? So again, like let's assume they've been in market for a while, like they have product market fit, right? So there's people who buy their stuff. Where is a good place for them to start like digging into what their current value assets might be?
I think that when you start to have, about 10 people, you have enough inertia inside, like you have enough of an engine. Your people are your engine, right? So you have enough of an engine to kind of go, okay, we need to really work together. We need to be orchestrated like a team, because there's going to be a lot of slip factors. So I think that's a good time to kind of say, okay, look, let's go through a unifying philosophy process to really distill all the questions we have in our heads about who are we really, what's our number one customer, why do we exist, how are we going to generate value, how do we operationalize and find the growth curve, in the market. Like when you say market share, well, what's the market you want to take share of, and why and how are you going to compete in that and create and I did the presentation on building an invincible brand. You're invincible when you have a philosophy and you can operationalize it, because nobody else is going to touch you. They can imitate you, but you'll always be a step ahead because you're always. So I think the best example I've used in my presentations is BMW versus Mercedes. You have two German companies, 100 years old, and BMW has the ultimate driving experience, and they've had it for over 60 years as a unifying principle, unifying philosophy. Mm-hmm. So everybody who touches anything with BMW is focused on the ultimate driving experience. They even hand the keys to their car to their next ad agency and says, no, you're not touching our philosophy. Take the car, drive it for some time and see why it's the ultimate driving experience. So you can now test your philosophy because you're living it. It's, why do they have 5 bolts instead of 4 bolts, right? It's down to that level of decision making. Mm-hmm. Whereas Mercedes has always run by slogans. Like I could tell you, like engineered like no other. They used to be known for their engineering. Now they're not. So they're always dodging some bullet. So the last part of my book, Unconventional Business, called Taglines Don't Work, because it doesn't compound value. Mm. You build a campaign for 3 or 4 years, then you kill the campaign.
Right.
So it contradicts fundamentals of value creation. It's like putting $1 into the bank, taking the $1 out, and expecting your interest to compound.
Right.
It's not going to work.
That's not how it works.
Yeah, you have to keep the $1 there. Right. You have to keep that ethos or the raison d'etre there. Mm-hmm. I hear your 3:45 clock.
Yes. And I think actually, so let's kind of just like wrap up around there, because I feel like, especially in marketing, it's very common to focus on campaigns, taglines, even just like if you look at logos, right? Logos evolve over time. It's almost like people assume that there's an expiry date on something, right? Like we're going to create a tagline, and with our expectation that there's an expiry date on this, and then 4 years later, I'm going to have to come up with a new one. And maybe partially that's based on like,
it's going to turn into another can of worms. But
Yeah, this is what we do on the show. But like,
I talk about it in my book.
Right. Well, and I think, and again, if you guys didn't hear it earlier in the show, if you would like a copy of Harish's book, please reach out to me and I will make sure that you get a copy for watching the show today. But I think this is a like really great place for people to ask questions is around this, what compounds value. Because if we are looking at our like core business competitive advantage, the thing we could all say, we come here and we do this. We come here and we create the ultimate driving experience. And a marketer can come here and be like, I come here and I communicate the ultimate driving experience. Right? Like everybody knows what they do. And even to the point where the janitor is like, I come here to clean the toilet so that the ultimate driving experience can be created. Because otherwise we don't have the right people in the room doing the things. And so
I use the janitor example too.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, personally, I've had very meaningful, and this is in my junior high school, but like there was a janitor in my junior high school who like loved his job and he loved for everything to be pristine and he loved the students. He wasn't like one of those grumpy people that like hated the students and then just getting like paid to clean, right? Like that guy was meant to be a janitor for young teenagers, which is like seems crazy. But like when you have the right people in the roles like that who have not just a logical understanding, but like a way of being connection to what you are doing here, the level of performance that's available skyrockets. And if that's what's driving value for your business, then the value of your business skyrockets. And it seems we've talked a lot about data today, right? And like it just seems like here's the formula, right? And everybody seems to be ignoring the formula. So I guess my last question for you today, Harish, is like, what is keeping us from, because I think again, our logic brain is like, oh yeah, all of this makes sense. What is stopping us from going and doing the work to actually identify our unifying philosophy so we can go and compound all that value?
I think that when I do talk to CEOs, there's a mindset shift that needs to happen. They're valid for thinking the way they're thinking, and they don't know what they don't know. And the entire business world has, and I'm speaking sincerely from a humanity perspective, because when I see owners with really successful companies, I had one owner who was 70 years old in my workshop and said, Harish, I wish I met you 30 years ago. I had the energy then. I don't have the energy to do this, but everything you're saying makes so much sense. And I feel like, oh my God, it's like the world misled him. And I know that whether it's Simon Sinek or Jim Collins, they're talking about this stuff, but the unifying philosophy is an executable solution. And I think when you don't have that, it's like, oh, I want to activate the thinking, but how do I execute it? How do I take action? How do I get my people to live it every single day? And if I'm not living it, call me on it.
Right.
Because if you're on the volleyball team and you didn't say, it's my ball, the ball drops. Right? So your team member is going to call you on and say, well, didn't you call it? So when we have that type of agreement, then I think life will be better for everybody. People will go to work and they'll find meaning. They'll find that soul, Tracy, that you talk about, because that's the soul. They're going to say, oh, I want to drive quality to lift your profits or the ultimate driving experience this way. What do you think? We should be doing it this way or that way. You start having creative ideas. You have brainstorming, all the things that we love as human beings, where we wake up in the morning and go, oh, I'm so energized to go to work.
Right.
And, I'm invested because there will be a piece of it for me. Like,
Right.
an athlete wants to have that little ring, of the world champions on their finger, and they show off all their rings because there's so much pride in going to practice every day. So I think that's where I think entrepreneurs who are forward thinking and say, you know what, I do want to build value. And I think we talked about that when they're early stage and they're at the 10-person mark, they said, okay, how do we get these 10 people to become a world-class team?
Right.
And that's a beautiful time to really do this work.
Mm-hmm.
It is work. It's heavy lifting. It's there is introspection. There is strategic discussion, but there's a process.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think this is so funny because this is coming up a lot for me this week, and it's only Wednesday. But this concept of that, it's almost like we know where we're being drawn to, like our natural energy, the way we naturally show up and deal with clients or things of that nature. They do exist, but they bubble underneath the surface. And then you get to these positions where you're like, I don't have the energy. But at the same time, the cool thing about the work that we do in these types of exercises is that it ends up being energy positive.
Yes, it does.
So, like right now, when we're in all of this, everyone's disengaged at work on the daily basis, right? Like we go to work and we come home in an energy deficit. But the point of doing these types of activities is to generate more energy so that we're not just saying, I'm out of energy. I spent all my energy. Okay? There's more of that is available, but is available through that authenticity of knowing what we would do and then in fact doing what you would do. And I think that I don't like to feel like there's a point where like anyone should give up, right? Like if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, that sounds really amazing, but I don't have the bandwidth or the energy or the time or the whatever to do something like that. The whole point of this is to get more of it back. So to invest your time, your effort, your energy now so that on an ongoing basis, there is more of it. We are making good decisions. We are finding the right people. We are doing what we would do, and we're compounding that value so no one else can take it away.
Well, Tracy, I know we're running out of time. I hope we have a part 2. And I'll plant
on
that
the show
seed.
all the time. I have like a whole backlog of part 2s we need to do.
I'll plant that seed. But what I'd like to say is that the power in knowing who you are and why you're here is unleashes it incredible human energy and potential. It's the reason for living. It's why people, you don't see a professional athlete feeling sad and being disengaged. They're pulling all the stops to the point where they're breaking bones and tearing ligaments, and they all out. I mean,
I'm currently concussed.
That's true. That's true. So, anyways, let's leave it on that high note of, how do we unleash that energy and value creation in people? Because we are, at the end of the day, trading our entire life for a business entity.
Right.
Okay, that's a high price to pay and be miserable doing it every day.
Right.
That should be enough motivation to go, I just don't want to be this way. There's a way out.
Right.
There's a way out for all those 10 people or 50 people or 100 people to now align, be on the same page, and go into one direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, if you guys seen the show before, I think you understand why I invited Harish to the show. Because philosophy in general is a big exploration. So we just skimmed the surface in our conversation here today. But Harish, in particular, if people would like to speak to you or learn more about the Unifying Philosophy, where is the best place for them to go do that?
I'll give you my details, Tracy. My LinkedIn profile is there. My cell phone number is right on my LinkedIn profile. I'm very accessible.
He is very accessible. I have him on the WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And we will, as I mentioned, the third time's a charm. So for everybody listening, if you would like the ebook, and I highly recommend it, I have it. It's awesome. It's changed a whole bunch of perspectives I had about stuff. Reach out to me and we'll make sure that you get that. Or you can reach out to Harish and say you saw him on the show and he will send it to you as well. But don't this is not the type of thing where you're like, oh, I sat and listened to a conversation for 60 minutes and I know all the things about unifying philosophy. Nope. There's more to explore. There's more to learn. So please connect with Harish, connect with myself. We were just blowing everybody's minds with all of our details today, so we didn't have anybody in the comments. But connect with other people who are participating in the conversation and explore. Don't let this be the last time you get in a conversation on this topic, but the first of many times. And with that, everybody, thank you for tuning in today. Harish, thank you so much for sharing all your wonderful knowledge. And until next time, everybody, permission to do you.